That film called, I think, was it The Morning After is the correct title?
Yes.
That film. That's really a frightening thing to see you that way. And I know that a lot of people, friends of mine, were shocked when they found that you, I guess the news came out in one of the news magazines first, I think, that you had been alcoholic. Actually, that isn't correct to say, is it? Because alcoholics never say they were alcoholic. They say
That's
are
absolutely right.
alcoholic.
You're always an alcoholic.
Yeah.
They say they're recovered or recovering
Yeah.
alcoholics. I'd like to say one thing very important before I forget it, is there are a lot of people dying from alcoholism because the rest of us are enabling them to, because there's a stigma about that disease, as you probably know. And for centuries, they've been putting the blame on the character of the addict, and it's not so. There's no degeneration or loose morals or character defects in an alcoholic. It's a physical disease. An alcoholic has a certain metabolism and glandular setups that make them chemically adapt themselves to alcohol. And for them it is a stimulant, and it is calories, and it is food, and their bodies adapt to it. And it is a true addiction. And it has nothing to do with a person not being mature enough not to drink too much. It's a true addiction, like heroin addiction.
Does that mean that you were destined to become an alcoholic at birth if you
Yes.
ever took a drink?
That's true.
That's,
Now, for me, it took many, many years as just a social drinker along with everyone else.
Yeah.
And of course, by the time I realized I was in trouble, I was too deluded, like most alcoholics are, to be able to understand what was wrong with me.
Can you, I know it's supposed to be hard to find the point where you became an alcoholic in the sense that you were over the line into the danger zone. Can you isolate that point in your own life?
No, and I've tried to many, many times. When did I go from the point where I drank with my friends at a party or something, and when I began to drink way ahead of them? And I can't, you tend, I find, to get with people who are heavier drinkers without realizing what you're doing. And now that I'm a non-drinker altogether, I find that I've lost most of my friends who drank very heavily. I just don't see them.
They avoid you?
They kind of avoid me.
Yeah.
I think I get to their conscience a little bit now.
Are there well-known people in the show, in our business and show business, who are alcoholic that the public doesn't suspect? Obviously, I'm not asking for names, but do you know of cases?
There are many recovered alcoholics
Yeah.
in show business, many, and of course they don't want to say so, and I can't blame them too much.
Yeah, a few do, like yourself, and some don't, do they? And some don't like to talk about it.
Mercedes McCambridge, for one,
Yeah.
particularly.
Yeah.
She kind of broke the ice for the rest of us, I think.
I know Robert Young has talked about his in
Yes,
articles.
Dana Andrews.
Yeah. It's fascinating. Sometimes people have asked me, this boring interview questions, what are you proudest of in your career and that kind of thing. And it's always hard to think of those things, but I did a two-part show on alcoholism one time. And
Yes, I saw
whenever
it.
you get a letter that says, your show saved my life, or something, I guess that has a kick that you can't get in any other kind
That's
of
very,
show
very
business.
true. And I'm sure you got a lot of those.
There are a lot of those. Television has a great power that way if used
Yes.
that way. Can you look at old shows that you've done and tell when you were crocked, or were you ever in your
Never.
work?
I was never crocked. I love that. During work.
Yeah.
I did not drink before work or during work or ever in the daytime,
Yeah.
which was my own particular cop-out. I said, I'm not one of those guys who has to have a drink in the morning, and I do not drink in the daytime or at work. I drink at home after work. And that proves to me that I didn't have a drinking problem.
That's right. A lot of people say that. Are you kidding? I can go all day without a drink.
That's right, by
yet-
gritting my teeth.
And yet they can be alcoholic.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Vernon Johnson wrote a book called I'll Quit Tomorrow, which I recommend to anyone who has a relative or a husband or wife that they think has a drinking problem. It's marvelous. But that guy in the book did all the wrong things. He went to a psychiatrist to find out what was wrong with his character or his personality that made him drink.
And you say that's bad.
That's not even valid.
Yeah.
What was wrong with him, he was physically addicted to alcohol.
Yeah.
That was the reason. And you need a different kind of treatment, different kind of help.
One of the shocking moments in that book was when she called the doctor, and he said coldly, "There's nothing I can do."
And he was right.
And he may have been right, but he could at least have explained that, because he just left her
Why?
hanging. I mean, he just sort of hung up the phone. And
Doctors, for some reason, don't deal too much with alcoholics because there isn't anything medically you can do if they don't want to quit. And most people who are deeply into a chronic or acute alcoholism do not, at that point, want to quit.
Yeah.
They can't conceive of life without drinking. It looks desolate and bare and dull to them.
You can see why people would go to a psychiatrist, though, because in your own case, for example, you had everything, you know, fame, success, money, family, home, all of that, and you were destroying it, theoretically.
Yes.
Therefore, you must hate yourself. Therefore, you must go to a psychiatrist, would, I suppose, be the line of reasoning.
That's true.
But the fallacy is that
That there is no pre-drinking morbid psychology in an alcoholic. It happens as a result of his physical addiction. Every time you get drunk, medically or legally drunk, you lose about 10,000 brain cells. Gone, dead, died forever. And about 1 million to 2 million more that are severely damaged that will go if you stop drinking, and you actually lose IQ points. In drinking, you can lose up to 30 IQ points, which you can't get back.
that's astonishing.
Yes.
You say you were never drunk when you were, say, taping or filming a show, but since you drank all those years, there must have been some debilitation, something that might have showed over the years in your work. Are you able to spot that in watching your work over the years?
No, I'm not.
If you were losing
the
those
only thing
brain-
I noticed was energy.
Yeah.
A little debilitation, and I didn't have quite as much energy. And I thought, I wonder what's the matter with me. I exercise and everything. The delusion. I didn't stop to think that it might be that.
In Barbara Mahoney's book, it's terrifying that what happens to the wife of an alcoholic, because she has the kids and the school, and the kids are embarrassed by the terrible scenes they see at home and say things like, "Well, is Daddy really going to hurt you, Mommy?" and things when he would threaten her or hit her or whatever. But she said at least the husband could get away, even if he stumbled out of the house and went to work all day drunk. He at least got away, but she was there the whole time, and she would
Yes.
drink too. How did it work with your own wife?
Well, my own wife was an alcoholic too, it turns out.
Yeah.
We were both in treatment. As a matter of fact, my wife is a therapist now at a treatment center in Phoenix at St. Luke's Hospital.
Treating alcoholics?
Treating alcoholics, yes. And doing very well at it, as a matter of fact. So we didn't have quite that same problem, but it's true that either spouse, the one who is non-alcoholic, is as sick emotionally. They're very sick and they need treatment. Usually if you don't treat both of them, the alcoholic does not get well. What happens is that the alcoholic is very ashamed and very guilty about what he is doing, and he cannot help himself. But he can't stand to attack himself that way, so he projects his own anger at himself onto his spouse. He said, if it weren't for you, I wouldn't drink. You're the one that makes me drink, and uses those kind of rationales. So that eventually the spouse begins to feel, maybe I am the reason. Maybe it's me. If I just would change and treat him differently, he wouldn't drink. And they become very neurotic and sick themselves and need help.
Which of you was it who decided to seek help first?
It was
and why?
me.
Yeah. You were-
Yeah, I was the one, yeah.
Yeah.
I began to have the one symptom that you cannot avoid, and that's a personality change when I drank. A personality. I was always a very happy drunk if I got drunk. And I had a very high tolerance, which I found out later is one of the clues. If you have a very high tolerance and can stay on your feet speaking clearly when everybody else is going down the drain, that's a sign that you may have a propensity physically for alcohol.
Yeah, you do hear that very thing used by people who say, well, so-and-so has no trouble because she never changes or he never changes. He can take 6 or 8 drinks and you'd never know it. That is.
That's
I've
always
also heard
said
that
by-
an increased tolerance is dangerous.
Increased tolerance, at a certain point, this happened to me, your tolerance goes to nothing. Just all of a sudden, you can't drink at all.
Yeah.
But strangely enough, one of the things that makes an alcoholic physiologically, is that it is a depressant for most people. For an alcoholic, it is a stimulant. And as long as his blood level of alcohol is on the rise, he'll perform better. His motor responses will be better. His concentration will be better. A normal person gets worse.
That is, so a lot of performers claim that they do get better in performance if they have a drink. And this is true, isn't it? Then with some
If they
cases.
tend to be people who will
Yeah.
adapt chemically to alcohol, it very likely is true.
Because there are people who will say that's never true. It's flatly never true. A drink ruins you. But, well, the
Yeah, I
limelight
was saying.
story, I guess.
We
is
won't
a
mention
terrible-
any names, of course.
No. But that's a vicious trap because a performer has to be good. He has to have his edge on, so to speak.
Yes.
He has to have that drink. And
That I never
That one.
tried. I always felt that would a dulling thing.
Yeah.
And of course, there was always the guilt there. It's a bad thing.
It might have been well
raised
if
to think
you-
it was a bad thing.
You were raised that way.
Yes.
Was there no drop of liquor in your home as a child?
I think there was a drop of liquor in my home, but nobody ever drank it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't. I come from a culture, Midwest Nebraska, where
Yeah.
there was booze in the house, but weeks would go by without anyone having any.
That's true.
That seems to have changed even there, though. I think it's the whole country is.
We've become a drinking culture. We really have. I think
Are there any
it's-
figures on how many people are alcoholics and don't know it? I don't know how you'd get them.
Well,
but
they
there
think
might
there's
be
about
estimates.
15 million in the United States.
Yeah.
And of course, there's only about 250,000, I think, in AA, and a few thousand others in treatment centers around the country. And the rest are people who are probably listening to us right now and denying to themselves they have a problem, that something's gnawing back there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, really, I'm drinking too much. But I always told myself, I drink because I enjoy it. I can quit anytime I want. And I was lying to myself. I really couldn't.
Yeah.
But as long as you keep doing it, you never have to prove that. I've seen reports that say an alcoholic can be taught to be a social drinker again, but it isn't so, because his body never really changes.
Yeah.
I think there's some damage that's done that never can be set right again.
Mm-hmm.
And if you ever drank, I think I'd probably be back to drinking too much again. And I like life too much without it now. Now that I'm completely free of it, I don't have any desire to ever drink again.
Mm-hmm. Did anybody like an agent or anyone ever warn you to stop drinking or you'd ruin your career?
No, but a very dear friend of mine did.
Yeah.
About 4 years ago, I believe. Very dear friend of mine. And it's amazing how deluded I was, because I really wasn't very nice about it. And I said, that's my business. I enjoy it, and that's my business. I don't think you have any right.
Mm-hmm.
And the poor man cried. And I couldn't see it. It took me a long, long time to understand, that he was seeing me objectively, and I was totally deluded about it.
At the later point, did an agent or anyone ever warn you not to admit that you were an alcoholic, because that would ruin
boy.
your career?
Many, many.
Really?
Yes, they don't. Please don't do that.
They didn't care if you didn't quit, but they just didn't want you to talk about it.
Please don't talk about it.
Really?
Well, I didn't know,
Yeah.
what kind of reaction I might get.
I had a family on this show. It was really quite a gripping interview to do, and certainly to watch, who on one of those alcohol shows, where the mother and the father and the daughter, who had found the mother with a bullet in her head, having tried to kill herself. And I wonder why some alcoholics try suicide and others don't. Were you ever near suicide?
No, although I thought of it at times. I think almost every alcoholic does. When they're drinking, it's a terrible depressant to your brain.
Uh-huh.
Terrible depressant. A lot of about 50% of the suicides in the United States are alcohol related, but they're not all alcoholics. If a set of circumstances hits a human being, someone hears maybe that he might be fired, or he has something on his mind and drinks a little, they can fall into a depressed state where they're not thinking clearly and commit suicide, and it has happened. They're not all alcoholics, but it is alcohol related.
Do you wish that booze were not a subject for humor?
I do now, and I've played my share of comedy drunks.
Uh-huh.
I did on Broadway, as a matter of fact, in a review. It was my big thing to come out in one and do a drunk.
Do you wish Dean Martin would let up on the booze humor?
I don't like to get that narrow-minded about it, really.
Yeah.
I don't like to be a crusader or have missionary zeal about booze. A lot of people can drink socially, and they don't have any propensity towards alcoholism. They'll never become alcoholics.
Yeah.
There are a lot of non-alcoholic, irresponsible drinkers who drive and do such things as that.
Yeah.
But unless booze could just disappear from the face of the earth, I don't think there's anything can be done about it.
Did you drive when you were drunk?
I have.
Yeah.
Yes, I have. Fortunately, nothing ever happened to me. I
Did
was
you
very
roll a
lucky.
car over once alone? Was that?
I had a wreck in a sports car that was not related to alcohol. I happened to be sober at the time.
Gee. There's a
That
negative
didn't hurt
lesson in
myself.
that, I guess.
Yes.
Can you tell what the worst aspect of it is when you're drunk? Is it, looking back over it all, is it the damage you do to yourself? Is it the damage you do to your wife or your kids? Or,
Well, all of that is a terrible thing, because you do have terrible guilt and terrible shame. What really happens is that most of us have fairly high values, and we get into characterological conflict. Our behavior is in conflict with our values. And it's a guilt-producing thing. But you're really in a grip of something you cannot do anything about. Cannot do anything about without help.
You said your behavior is in conflict with your values. I mean, is it as simple as the fact that your parents would be ashamed of you if they saw what you had become of you? Did it harken back to your fairly strict upbringing, or was it a strict?
Yes, I think it was a strict upbringing.
Yeah.
I think I was raised in the church, in the Presbyterian church.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I didn't drink much at all in my 20s. I was in my middle 30s before I even started. And then it was social, you know. I was one of those people who was bound to be trapped and didn't know.
Yeah.
Just had no way of knowing. That's why I'm talking about it now. There are ways to know.
Is there a test people can take, or will there ever be, where they take a piece of litmus paper or something and find out if you're a potential alcoholic?
I think probably. Just in the last year, they found out an awful lot about what it does physically, how it affects people who might be alcoholics. I think the day will come. Whether they'll ever find out exactly what causes it, it seems to be a variety of factors. Hormonal, chemistry, glandular, something to do with the brain cells. There are a number of things that make a human being adapt to it. And they get to the place where they like the calories from alcohol because they're very easy to assimilate. And everything else is too hard to assimilate. Alcohol, you know, diffuses across your brain instantly.
Yeah.
And it just is easier to, and people can go for weeks and weeks just on the calories from alcohol and no other food.
Now, how long was your siege, your bad drinking years?
That's very hard for me to say. Very hard. I would imagine about 7 years. Now that's my own guess, and I'm probably being very conservative about it myself. As someone who observed me over that time might say, "Are you kidding?"
Does it show in your liver?
Fortunately, I didn't have any damage. Any damage. It was slightly enlarged, and would have gone into the cells in your liver will puff up to try and take on the job of assimilating all that acetic alcohol that's going into the system, and it just can't. And eventually, cells will begin to die, and then you're into cirrhosis of the liver, and you're dead.
When you were in the haze of being, when you were boozing, if forgive the crude term, when you were drinking, could you see through that haze people's attitude changing toward you, and people beginning to not want to come over to the house in the evening or anymore? And
well, the people who came over liked to drink as much as I did.
you attract that sort of person.
I usually drank at home. I must say I wasn't a swinger or anything like that. I just drank at home. Got grandiose and verbose. Loved to debate things like religion and all those things. And now I go to parties, cocktail parties, where I don't drink, and to stand off objectively and watch the transition of a cocktail party between 0.25 per millimeter, I guess it is, blood alcohol. As it goes up, the decibels, it gets louder and louder in the room. Suddenly people are talking about politics and religion and solving Watergate.
Yeah.
And then a few more drinks, a couple of hours later, and it's really loud, and a lot of hearty laughter and backslapping and hugging, and the guys are starting to tell dirty jokes, the ones they wouldn't tell otherwise.
Yeah.
And then later in the evening, about 80% of those people will be very euphoric and happy, but about 20% will either be angry or very sad. You'll see people sitting down crying and saying, "Leave me alone, you don't understand," or somebody will get in a terrible fight.
Can you tell which ones are the problem drinkers?
Well, the ones who stay till the party is over and then some usually are the problem drinkers.
Yeah.
Maybe headed for addiction, but there are a lot of heavy drinkers who are doing a lot of damage to their liver and to their brain, who are not alcoholics, are not addicts.
That's the tough part, is to say I am an alcoholic, isn't it?
It really is. It's the hardest part of treatment. No matter how much help you have, the job is to get somebody to admit that they can't handle it. They have no control over alcohol if they drink.
Do they say, "Are you Van Dyke? What did you have to drink for? You had everything." Do you get that attitude from people?
That's true, as if something tragic had to happen. That's the common belief about alcoholism, unfortunately. That there's something terribly wrong in your life or you wouldn't do it. But an alcoholic drinks for the same reasons that the social drinker does. Relief from tension and stress, to feel comfortable with strange people, to lubricate social intercourse. Really, is what it is.
Do you envy me that I can take a drink and not?
No, I went through about a year as I guess most recovering alcoholics do. It takes a year for your system to get back to where it was before. Really resenting it sometimes. Other people could drink. Now I have no desire to drink. And I don't envy people who do at all.
Yeah, that's good.